Hello, welcome to this week's edition of the Free Thought Forum. We've had a little bit of a technical glitch here today, so we're starting a little late. But I'm your host, Brian Fields, and with me is my co-host, Jen Flora.
Hi, everybody.
And we thought we'd get started with a little bit in the news in free thought and atheism and religious-based stuff.
Well, we have a lot of interesting things in the news today, and one thing. This was reported on May 31st of this year. A young Sudanese woman remains in jail with her 5-month-old baby, her legs shackled, after being sentenced to death by stoning for her crime of adultery. It was reported that the young girl, and I think you say her name Adula, admitted to the charges after being beaten by her brother. The man who was with her was denied all charges and was freed. Sudan is one of 7 countries that continues to do death by stoning. Although this is rare for them to actually sentence someone to this kind of death, it still does happen. And in recent years, there have been other young women who have been sentenced to a death by stoning. However, their sentence was overturned by appeal, So if and when this girl is stoned, how will this happen? What happens? Well, they pick out rocks that would not make the death too fast and not make the death too slow. And she would be buried up to her chest, and the rocks would be thrown at her. If she was able to free herself, then she is freed. She's able to go.
How humane.
Yes. And, well, there's a bit of a difference here. Men are only buried up to their waist. So they have, if you've ever been buried in the sand up to your waist, you have a little bit better of a chance of getting out than if you're buried up to your chest, which is basically no chance of getting out. So, of course, this is a very barbaric way of dying.
So what I don't understand about this is, I mean, the man who she was accused of cheating with was just said, "Oh, I didn't do it," and they let him go.
That's right.
But so who did they assume she had sex with? I mean,
I don't know. I guess the thing is that she gave her thing under duress.
Right.
She was being beaten. I mean, if someone was torturing me, I'd say, all right, calm down. I did it, you know. She gave hers under duress, and that's what got her sentenced. And not only that, but this young girl, she does not understand the dialect. Ugh. And according to the article that I read, she did not have a translator in the court with her.
Right.
So she is sitting in jail not fully understanding what is going on.
Wow. Yeah, this is one of those things where, you know, today in the first world countries, we look at this and say, well, this is barbaric. But, you know, this is, you know, the type of morality that went into the construction of the Bible and the religious mentality that still is around today. And it's still something that it's pretty horrifying what can happen when you take your ethics from something like that.
Exactly, and you know, another point to be made by the story is the just the discrimination that continues, and this happened in the Bible, but discrimination that continues between men and women, and we can see that outlined all throughout the story.
Yeah, I mean, to be clear, I mean, neither one of them obviously should have any. I mean, you know, the whole idea of sentencing someone to death for cheating on someone else is because, you know, in that case, you know, the woman's property, and you know, the property isn't allowed to just run off and go do whatever property wants to do. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's why the punishment's so much harsher on women than it is on men. But I mean, it's still barbaric in the extreme, regardless. The idea that I mean, it goes back to owning someone else. You know, if you can own someone else and tell them what they do with their own body or who they are with, you know, it's unethical, immoral, and barbaric.
It is hard to believe, though, that this still occurs, even in first world countries, that this is still an ongoing problem. And of course, human rights activists are pretty much all over this.
Right.
But I hear that you have some interesting stories, and we can bring it right back home here to
Oh,
America.
yeah, look at this. Good News Club to teach genocide to kids in public schools. The Good News Clubs are a series of, religious clubs in schools. It's obviously legal for schools to have clubs. If they're going to have one club of one particular type, they generally have to have clubs for any religion or anything else. But, a common one to have in your school is a Good News Club, and it's, a Bible, Christian-based club. It's sponsored by the Child Evangelism Fellowship, and they have groups in tens of thousands of elementary schools all across America. They meet after school on a regular basis, and they get lessons on Bible and Christianity with a conservative or a fundamentalist perspective. And they've been teaching the story of the Amalekites since 1973. And I don't know how well you know your Bible, but essentially you are to go and completely destroy the Amalekites, people, animals, every living thing, nothing shall be left. And the manual tells the teachers to say that to kids, and it says, well, that was pretty clear, wasn't it? They are quite eager to drive the message home that the first thing, that if God gives you instructions to kill a group of people, you must absolutely kill every last one. Don't leave anything standing, not even, their kids or, their sheep or anything else. I mean, and the instruction manual for the Good News Club reads, the Amalekites had heard about Israel's true and living God many years before, but they refused to believe in him. The Amalekites refused to believe in God, and God had promised punishment. And so, it goes on to say that pretty much that you must champion obedience in all things. If God, and it boils down to, if God tells you to kill someone like non-believers, atheists, he really wants you to kill them. No questions asked, no exceptions allowed.
So, we're teaching this to elementary kids.
Yes.
Who are, basically naive, ignorant on many issues. So what's to say that someone else can't come up to them, maybe an older child, someone who's 15 or, trying to play a practical joke, and say that God told this person to do something. And what is this kid going to do with that information? Aren't we, in this particular sense, aren't we encouraging our kids to commit crimes?
Well, absolutely. And if you consider that, people do have mental illnesses. Some people do hear voices. Some people, think they hear and see things. And many times those things are attributed to God speaking to them. And it happens, more times than anyone can count. So if you honestly believe that you heard a voice in your head that says, kill your neighbor, you're raised as a child to believe that that voice is the voice of God. And it's not something to be questioned. Am I mentally ill? No, it's the voice of God. So now you've got a recipe here for this this horrible situation where someone actually truly believes that they are doing God's work by killing the enemies of God. And it's happened. It's not that far out there. It's happened many, many times where people simply, they're trained to think that that voice in your head that you're hearing is God. And,
I would wonder what a mental health professional would say about this particular club and the details that they give to children. Because, in my personal belief, to teach a child that they're going to go to hell if they're bad and do something wrong and this and that and the other thing, I think that's child abuse.
Yeah.
That's just scaring someone. And now we've just taken that one step further. And what are the mental health professionals going to say about this?
Well, according to the Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, the actual author of the majority opinion which permitted the Good News Clubs into public schools, none of this is really religious. The Good News Club is simply teaching morals and character development from a particular viewpoint.
Oh, what viewpoint is that? I mean, it's a wow. I don't even want my child to be learning something like that. I mean, just
Well, obviously, in after-school clubs, I mean, in the only meager defense I can offer is that, they are voluntary, so your child isn't being forced to go attend one of these clubs. I freely admit that. But it just, your child, if you send your child to these clubs, this is what they're learning. And so...
And do you want them to learn that? I mean, is that something that so many Christians have told me today, well, the stuff that's in the Bible about women, that's not really, that we don't really follow that one anymore. So do we follow this one now? We continue to follow the killing of other people because we don't like them or what they believe?
There's plenty of examples in the Bible of killing, just the... Some people accused the author of unfairly harping on, just one of the Good News Club's 123 lessons. But there's two more lessons which endorse genocide. The one on the Battle of Jericho, and another discussing how Israel suffered by not following God's command to get rid of the Canaanites. But these lessons in the Bible are not... there's not just a few of them. I mean, they're all over the Bible. It's something that's just a common thread that people, they ascribe Bible is good book. They don't consider the idea of what is really in it. And, there's been many studies that show, Christians don't read the Bible. They don't know what's in it. They assume that what's in it is good because they're told it's good. But when you go back and read it, you realize it's just, it's horrible when it comes to ethics.
And a lot of times, too, the Bible is read sporadically. It's not, you read this part, and then you go back and read this part, and you go back and read this part. So you're essentially being told to skip over some of the more negative information, because in any kind of book or movie that you may not like that delivers a negative message, there's always going to be a few positives in it.
There's I don't know if, as an ex-Christian, one of the things that was common when I was a Christian is these little books called devotionals, and what they are is to encourage you to read, walk down the garden path of these inspirational verses that they've picked out of the Bible, and then they deconstruct them to the point where they mean whatever they tell you they mean, and to try and apply that to your daily life. And I remember an uncle I have who I was visiting their house one time, and they decided that they were going to do their daily devotionals, and they still do their daily devotionals. And they took this verse and they looked it up in the Bible, and then they read it, and then it was like reading tarot cards or reading tea leaves. They looked for everything in that verse that could apply to what happened to them that very day. Yep. They were looking for the pattern in the Bible because the devotional said, well, this is today's verse. So obviously that verse must apply to something that happened to them that day.
I'm sure they found something, too.
Oh, yeah, they did. And it's like reading a horoscope, you know?
Yeah.
So I would encourage, if you're watching our show and you are a Christian, to actually start at the beginning of the Bible, to think about the verses that you're reading, and read it the entire way through. And remember that if you believe that this book is divine, that it is the Word of God, that you are going to have to justify why it portrays the story that it portrays. And if you get to the end of it and you still say, well, this has to be the word of God, well, I don't know what to say. You know, it's been joked that reading the Bible makes more atheists than anything else.
Yeah.
So.
But that's your challenge for the day.
Yes. Do you have another story for us?
I don't have more stories. I have some quotes. So why don't we go with your stories? Because you have some really good ones, and then go into the topic of the day.
All righty then. Well, the next story I have here is apparently if you are a Catholic preacher and you're discovered playing with things you shouldn't be playing with, and they decide, well, we're actually going to turn around and defrock you. Well, guess what? You do have career options open to you.
Yippee.
How about working for the TSA? Apparently, Thomas Harkins, who is a Catholic priest who worked in churches in southern New Jersey, he now holds a security job at Philadelphia International Airport working for the TSA.
Well, that makes me feel safer.
Oh, absolutely. And his title is Transportation Security Manager Baggage, but there's nothing to ensure that he only works with baggage and never with kids. You know, consider how busy things get at airports and, you know, those pat downs that you have to go through.
Yep.
Yeah. And
they've done that to kids before. It's not uncommon.
yeah.
It's not an uncommon thing.
So they Karen Polisera spoke. I hope I pronounced her name correctly. Spokeswoman with SNAP, the Survivors Network of Those Abused by Priests, says, and I would agree with this statement. You know, they should know who they're hiring. If the problem with everything the Catholic Church has done with abusive priests is that they push everything under the rug. They try to make sure, nobody knows the details of what's going on. And now, it's not like these people are in jail. They're out in the world. Mm-hmm. So free to be hired for whatever people are going to hire, and nobody's ever going to do anything about it. And so it's so the question that, remains, well, how did he get his job despite his past? The TSA says that the allegations are so old, they don't show up on a criminal background check.
What about an FBI check? Wouldn't they continue to show up on that? I mean, I thought child abuse charges aren't dropped from your record, or why would they be?
Well, the other issue is that since the Catholic Church is settling these lawsuits out of court and never really reporting their child rapists to the police, there often isn't a complete criminal record.
Right, and they don't have to be put on the
right.
the list of sex offenders.
Yeah. So, well, they should be. They legally have to be, but,
Well, then I would assume if he was on a list of sex offenders, they should be able to get that information.
Right.
But
well, and I have one more story here. Representative Mark Cohen, who we talked to, and back in January when they announced the Year of the Bible, we talked with him about the issues behind the Year of the Bible. It was a unanimously voted resolution, and the thing is that, the representatives essentially didn't read it. Mark Cohen had a press conference where he was calling for them to bring the resolution back for an actual vote. That never happened because it hit I don't know what the exact rule is, but essentially it's a statute of limitations on bringing it back to the floor before anything could happen. So now he is seeking to declare 2012 the Year of Religious Diversity in Pennsylvania. Essentially, he has sent out a memorandum to the members of the Pennsylvania House of Representatives asking for co-sponsorship of a proposed resolution declaring 2012 as the Year of Religious Diversity in Pennsylvania, which recognizes and celebrates the religious diversity encompassed by Pennsylvania as a fulfillment of the vision of William Penn. And mentioned in the proposed resolution within the memorandum, amongst various other religious affiliations or lack thereof, are many who claim no religious affiliation: non-believers, Unitarians, and Buddhists. When we talked with him, there were Unitarians, non-believers, and Buddhists there, and it was great. We got a chance to talk to him specifically and a few other representatives about the issues behind the Year of the Bible. It's good that they're making a statement. I think that is a wonderful thing for them to step up and say, we're making this statement. It'd be even better if they didn't do the Year of the Bible thing in the first place.
I agree, and I mean, I applaud his noble efforts, but religious diversity should be every year.
Right.
It shouldn't be just, well, we're going to do it this year, and in 2013, maybe we'll just pick the Buddhists, and in 2014, it's every year. I mean,
Yeah.
this is what the vision of this country was, religious freedom.
Right.
And that's every year, not one year.
Yeah, and so, I mean, I agree with you. I mean, I think it's good that he's doing this and following through and trying to make right something that was really a wrong thing to do in Pennsylvania, but shouldn't have had to do it in the first place. And I hope that the other representatives take notice and realize that what they did was wrong, and that really Pennsylvania is a Pennsylvania for every citizen of the state, not for one particular religion or one particular group of religious sects. But in the meanwhile, I mean, this at least is a step towards undoing that.
It is a very positive step.
Yeah.
So, we'll have to see how that goes.
Right.
But at least we are going in the right direction.
Yes.
That's a good thing.
Yeah.
So I'm happy about that. But
Yeah. Go ahead.
But today, why don't we talk a little bit about can religion and science coexist?
That'd be great.
Yeah, can they be together? Can we is what science going to do to religion, or what can religion do to science? I have this great quote that I thought we should start off with.
Okay.
It was made by a gentleman by the name of Edward Osborne Wilson. He received his BS and MS in biology. He received a PhD from Harvard. He did work with ants, but he is most well known for his connection of evolution and biology to other disciplines. And he made this quote to Esquire magazine. If someone could actually prove scientifically that there is such a thing as a supernatural force, it would be one of the greatest discoveries in the history of science. So the notion that somehow scientists are resisting it is ludicrous. I really like that quote.
Mm-hmm.
It really shows that, why a scientist would absolutely love to say, is there a creative designer?
Mm-hmm.
Let's make a hypothesis about it.
Right.
But how are you going to test it?
Well, and that's the thing, in science, what you're doing is you make a hypothesis, you formulate a test, then you run a test, and then you interpret the results, and those results form a feedback loop until essentially you understand what you understand about a topic. But it's a constantly changing process, because we never really do understand everything that we want to understand, but everything we do understand is based on evidence. It comes back to tests and evidence and what we can show about the nature of the universe. And
Yeah.
the problem with declaring the supernatural has always been, well, the supernatural can do whatever it wants to do. If you say the supernatural, well, it has this limit or that limit, then people say, well, no, it's God, or it's ghosts, or it's any number of things that are obviously there's no evidence for, just a unfounded hypothesis. And well, those don't get taken seriously, and it's not because there's some conspiracy to reject some sort of evidence that is around. It's because there is no evidence to begin with.
And there's nothing to
Reject.
exactly. And well, in going along those lines, when you pit science versus religion,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, is that the true question, or is the true question evolution versus intelligent design?
Well, evolution versus intelligent design is a recent, I mean, relatively recent conflict. But I mean, this goes back to Copernicus and Galileo. You know,
Oh, yeah,
is the Earth the center of the universe? Did God create the Earth for our existence, and because of that, He created Earth and the heavens and everything just here for us? And well, we can show now through science that there is no such thing as the center of the universe, that we are not at a center of the universe. The center of the universe doesn't exist. That, in fact, we're not even in the center of our own galaxy. We're on a back alley neighborhood of a spiral arm of the Milky Way galaxy. And so the universe is definitely not made just for us.
Right. There's plenty of other things in it, and well, of course, we have theories that revolve around how the universe formed and everything like that. Now, the science versus the religion question isn't age old. It's age old. It's been around for the longest time, and science just keeps coming up with more and more things.
Well, yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Okay.
Well, what you have here is you go back to the idea of the God of the gaps, and that is that if we can't explain it with science right now, well, obviously God did it. But as we discover new things and we fill in those gaps in knowledge, then all of a sudden, God maybe caused things that caused that, but we can accept science's explanation for that now. And we'll push back the realm of God back into the unknown. So anything that's not known, obviously God did, but that's a completely, it's a vanishing horizon. You know, over the years as we learn things, there's no room for God, and people feel uncomfortable with that.
And this question, of course, does come right home to York County, Pennsylvania, with the what was it, Klitzmore? Or was that one of the
Kitzmiller.
Kitzmiller
v. Dover.
Yeah, and well, there's there's a group of parents that actually got together on that, and versus Dover Area School District. So of course we're bringing that one right home. And I thought what might be a good idea is, what is a scientific theory? A scientific theory is hypotheses that have been tested and confirmed through experimentation and observation. Theories are improved as evidence is gathered. Theories need to be consistently confirmed by many scientists in many different places. And these theories need to they need to hold true through the sciences, physics, geology, astronomy. You can't test a theory and have one of the tests not work. Then you got to go back and find out what happened.
Right.
So a scientific theory, is a tested theory. It's been almost proven through experimentation.
In science, what people, so when you have a theory, a hypothesis, and a fact, and people get confused because these three words have very different definitions in scientific circles as they do in the colloquial way we use these words. So the way people generally use hypothesis and theory is to say, well, they're synonyms. And a fact is something that's real, that's proven. Well, in science, a hypothesis is an educated idea, something that says, well, I think this might have happened this way, and that's the place to start.
And the hypothesis must be testable.
Right, and a hypothesis has to be testable to be considered scientific. You can't say, you can't make as a hypothesis something that says, well, I think that something magicked into existence. Well, you can't test that because it's here, and there's no way to show without having something else magic into existence and then describing how that magic works and what the processes are that drive that magic. And but once you have a hypothesis, then a hypothesis can turn into a theory. But it gets tested, facts are discovered, and facts are an elemental unit of information. Fact stones are hard. Fact, the sky is blue during the day. Fact,
The sun is hot.
the sun is hot. Yeah. So a fact is just an elemental unit of data. So when you take facts and combine them with tested hypothesis, and you form an overarching explanation for something. Well, how did life come to be the way it is on Earth? Well, the current scientifically accepted theory of that is a theory of evolution, meaning that evolution has facts, has hypotheses, has everything in it that scientists across all sorts of disciplines have agreed explain how life transformed from one type into another over millennia. So, but there's also the fact of evolution. Things evolve. And there are ways to show that as well. But, so it's often said that evolution is both a theory and a fact. But the theory of evolution describes, with all of the information that's available in the scientific body of knowledge, exactly how evolution works.
But I mean, when you look at the scientific theory, the definition of a scientific theory, you come very close to what is a fact.
Well, the difference though between the two is that with a fact, like I said, a fact in the science circles is an elemental unit,
Yep.
where a theory is a body of knowledge.
Right.
So you come close to the colloquial definition of a fact.
Almost, yeah.
Yeah. So as we understand facts are, if you say fact, I have a date tomorrow night. Well, that is a fact. You probably have a date tomorrow night. But obviously you don't know that for 100% certain. People can cancel, things can change, so on and so forth. But you have a high degree of certainty that as long as nothing changes, you're going to have a date tomorrow night. Well, that's what we're talking about when we talk about the theory of evolution. There's a high degree of certainty that evolution happened. And when I say high, I'm talking about stronger than the idea that you're having that date tomorrow night. Because there is such imagine a date where, you've got security people picking up the person you're going to be with and making sure that you show up on time,
exactly.
And everybody dressing you and everything else. So what we're talking about is something that has been tested to the point of near certainty. But the only reason we say near certainty is because in science we always accept the idea that new information can come along to change that paradigm to something else. But it doesn't come along by just saying, well, I believe that creationism happened because I believe in God. It takes more than that. It takes study and testing and hypotheses and retesting. And if you're going to disprove something as solid as the theory of evolution, it's got to be a doozy.
Oh, yeah. This evolution versus intelligent design really came under fire in the case against the Dover Area School District. And one of the biggest claims on the side of intelligent design came from Michael Behe, who is a biochemist at the Lehigh University. And his claim is, he made a claim of irreducible complexity. Something that is so complex, it can't have come from any other thing, any other natural force, but an intelligent designer. And he brings up the flagellum is one of his favorites to bring up. Anything in that structure that is taken out of it, and the flagellum will not work.
Right.
However, the scientists, all his peers, colleagues, the university he works for, they all denounce this claim.
Right.
They all say there is enough evidence, there is enough experimentation that was done to suggest that these things could form naturally.
Yeah, there was a teacher. I'm trying to remember his name. He's a professor who wrote the books that we that biology students all over the country use right now. He's the author. He's one of the authors for that book. I forgive me, I'm forgetting his name, but he actually went on the stand in the Kitzmiller v. Dover trial, and he really demolished Behe's theory on the flagellum. He showed that in biology that even if you think you have something irreducibly complex, that evolution doesn't work that way. Evolution might throw in extra parts every now and then. It might take parts out. Something that functioned in one way in the past may function a different way in the future. So he actually had a mousetrap that he had taken apart.
Yeah, I love this one.
And he had taken some parts off the mousetrap to the point where it wasn't a functioning mousetrap. What you just had was the spring and the catch and the piece of wood. And so you didn't have a mousetrap anymore, but what you did have was a perfectly functioning tie clip. And he would take the mousetrap and he would clip his tie to his shirt.
I thought it was very trendy.
It was very trendy. It was kind of cute. But it shows that things can be used in surprising ways. It may not be ideal. A mousetrap is not the perfect tie clip. But given enough iterations with evolution working on something that functions that way, it will improve over time. That is, the theory of evolution pretty much shows that through natural selection. Because if it's successful to the reproduction of the species, it will stick around or it will improve. If it's not successful to the reproduction of the species, then it will not, it will not be as efficient or it will fall away.
And it makes sense. I
Yeah.
mean, if something's not efficient for a species to survive or not functioning correctly, doesn't it make sense that something might happen that is going to change that
Right.
to function, to help the organism function properly?
Right. Well, and people don't realize that, things don't change in a single generation. It takes multiple generations of intermixing DNA with different random mutation selections over millennia to bring forward a beneficial change. But we see that, in our species. We see our things like our size, our weight, the way we interact in different cultures develops from what's not necessarily healthy, but what gets us to procreate. And so it's not, there is plenty of species examples of, species that as an individual member of that species, they do some what you would consider self-destructive behavior. But if you take the praying mantis or several others, but the job of the species is simply to pass its DNA on to the next generation. And so if that's the goal of evolution, then what you have is simply that which makes it easier will make reproduction more successful and therefore make more of the same genetics because DNA carries those traits from generation to generation.
That's right. Well, and that is just one way that science and religion, of course, are versing each other because, intelligent design, you first, in order to subscribe to intelligent design, you have to say that there's an intelligent designer, whether you want to call the intelligent designer God or whatever you want to call it. You have to subscribe to something that was there in the nothing.
And in order to make that as a hypothesis, it's a perfectly reasonable hypothesis. But then you have to show us the designer, or you have to show how the designer came about, or you have to show how that thing that you claim is designed was actually designed by the designer, and you have to test.
I'm assuming the designer formed through abiogenesis.
But how did the designer abiogenerate?
Well, how does anything abiogenerate? Abiogenesis is just non-living to living.
Right.
So.
Well, that's not an outrageous question about abiogenesis. At some point, abiogenesis had to happen.
Well, in terms of intelligent design, it had to happen twice.
Right. Exactly.
The intelligent designer had to form, and then the intelligent designer had to use abiogenesis to form other things.
Right. So what you're doing is you're tossing the explanation ball back a generation. You're saying, well, we don't know how it was done, but God did it, or aliens did it, or something else did it. Well, how did aliens come about? Well, with God, you have an easy out. You say, well, God always existed. Well, why is it that the universe in some form or another, or the material that generated the universe can't be eternal? And if you take a look at what you're doing is you're making the explanation more complex by saying that the generation was intelligent. If we look at our world and the way our world has come about, intelligence, at least at the level that we would consider intelligence, is quite young in our history. Homo sapiens and the previous species that one would consider intelligent to a level to be self-aware to any reasonable point of view took billions of years to come about. And it was a complicated process. And we can show that process in the fossil record. But if you're going to answer with God and say, well, God did it, then you have to reconcile the idea that we have a species that came about through a painstaking natural selection of non-intelligent origins being used by a God who is perfectly capable of waving a species into existence. So now you're using God, who in your original hypothesis says, well, God waved his hand and brought us about 6,000 years ago. And you're saying, well, God could have caused evolution, or God could have been the primary force behind evolution. Well, it seems like a huge waste of resources at that point.
And you just brought up another thing. How old is the Earth? How old is the human species? The species of the species Homo. How old are we? We do have evidence there's a Homo erectus and other things. So how old is our species? How old is this Earth? Is it really trillions of years old? And could it really have been that there was these big, humongous creatures that all kids love to learn about called dinosaurs that lived on the Earth? Could that have been? That would make perfect sense if the Earth was trillions of years old. That it could have gone through those transformations.
One of my personal favorite Christian theories is the idea that God put those fossils there to test their faith. That's a personal favorite of mine.
Gave us something to do.
Yeah, essentially.
We're not bored enough with our days, trying to find food and
navigating, natural disasters and
waging war. We're not busy enough. So centuries later, we decided, paleontology. There we go. And the only problem with
it's just a hobby.
Well, the only problem with well, now we have archaeology too, and the only problem with archaeology is it's not finding the evidence it wants to find or should find if the Bible was true. It's not finding that the biblical can't make a case.
Right.
It's saying, well, we can't prove this happened. We can't prove that these people were attacked by this person. We can't prove this biblical story.
Right.
And currently they still debate King David. They wanted to find evidence of this wonderful ruler, and they wanted to find this kingdom, and there's a lot of debates.
Well, there's a reasonable case for the idea that Jesus Christ never existed as well, although there is very little evidence outside of the Bible to show that Jesus Christ existed. And when you're looking in archaeology, you want to look for confirming evidence. Now, the Bible is a collection of books, not by any one author. So you could say that the books in the Bible are corroborating each other, but it could just as well have happened that it was oral traditions written down. And in that case, then really you have to find some kind of archaeological record. And the Romans kept meticulous records, and one would think that an uprising of upstart Jews in Palestine, started by some pseudo-deific figure, would have been in the records. And it's not in the Roman records. Although Josephus wrote about Jesus, he was not a outside observer. He was a believer. So you you really have to look to cultures outside of Judaism to say, well, did Jesus exist or not? Is there some kind of evidence for that? And you don't see that. And so there's plenty of, historical figures in the Bible that you could point to and say, well, did they exist or did they not? But if you're going to talk about Christianity, start with Jesus.
Well, exactly. You can start there, but also another thing you need to consider is a lot of the, especially in the New Testament, these were handpicked. These were the ones that were chosen to go into the Bible. There's other so-called manuscripts out there,
right,
that did not make the cut. Why?
Yeah, if you read Bart Ehrman's books on the Bible, he wrote a few fascinating books about how the Bible was put together. Maybe we'll talk about that on another show. But I strongly recommend those books. They show how the Bible was transformed from one writing to another, and how things were not so cut and dried as one could make a reasonable claim that it's the Word of God. Now, we've been really kind of talking today, and we've kind of neglected to point out, we are a live show, and our phone number is up at the top of the screen. We have about 10 minutes, a little less than 10 minutes left of the show, 8 minutes or so, 7 minutes, and so we do still have time for a call. And if you want to call in, call now. The number is 717-846-5067. It should be there at the top of your screen. And if you have any comments on anything you've heard today, we'd be happy to take your call and talk to you.
And feel free to call in and disagree with us. I mean, that's the point of the show.
We love to debate and talk and discuss, and that's why we're here. So please call in. Anyway, I thought I'd take a moment to remind everybody.
That was a good idea.
Yeah.
That was a very good idea. And I'd be interested in hearing from callers who would like to debate the subject on the existence of Jesus. Because there were books written that Jesus did not exist.
Right.
We don't have a lot of evidence. And, of course, we have Case for Christ. I can't remember his name. What's his name?
Lee Strobel?
Lee Strobel, his Case for Christ. Well, if you watch that program, he only refers to the New Testament.
Right.
To defend Christ.
This, folks, is what we call a circular argument. That is an argument where you take the premise to explain the conclusion to support the premise to support the conclusion. In order to have an argument, you have to start with something outside the argument to support the premise, to support the conclusion, which doesn't need additional support. So from itself, you have to have something coming in to get something out. So,
and feel free to go back and watch that. It does. His whole argument revolves around the New Testament, and that's how he makes his case. And I mean, I don't see how you can come to that conclusion just by using. We don't even know who wrote the books. Everyone claims that Peter and Paul and wrote. Well, how do you know? They don't even have a last name.
Well, what they do is they take as premise that the person writing them was the author it claimed to be, and they can compare the writing styles from one book to the next. So they can say for certain that these books were probably written by the same person, or contemporaries of the same person that was close.
Right.
But yeah, they can't actually say, well, this was definitely written by a guy named Paul or Matthew or Mark or whatever, because you really have to take the word of the people who wrote it.
We don't have any information on the authors. It's not like a book where you can turn back the cover and you see a great little picture of the author and a little blurb about where they live and what they did and what all their likes and dislikes are. We don't know who these people are.
Right.
We've never seen them, but we're a little off topic on that case. We were talking about science and religion, and somehow we started talking about the authors of the Bible, which would be a great topic for another show. And, that's another thing I would be interested in hearing from callers on, obviously at this point there are some theists that believe in evolution, that subscribe to it, that, okay, evolution occurred. But it doesn't do anything to their faith.
Ken, the guy I was talking about, the one who actually disproved Michael Behe, is Ken, and I'm trying to remember his last name, but he's a Catholic. He's a believing Catholic, and he strongly supports the idea of evolution. He strongly supports the idea that evolution is something that God used. You know, also Watson. Francis Crick, one of the discoverers of DNA as well, was actually a really good friend of Christopher Hitchens, and was working really hard to help him identify the strains of cancer that was affecting him.
And there are many scientists out there that have made a lot of breakthroughs discovering the human genome. That was done by I think he was Catholic. I'm not quite sure what his affiliation was. But, obviously there are people out there that love science and it doesn't seem to do anything to their faith.
Right.
But will it? Could it? I mean, there are other people out there who learned about science and said, well, wait a second, how can science and religion coexist?
I think there's a lot of people who wish for there to be God, and so they'll accept the idea that there is a God, or try to resolve the cognitive dissonance between some almighty creator and studying the nature of the universe. But I think when push comes to shove, there are most of the scientists who are religious are simply just looking for a way to resolve what makes them feel comfortable with what they understand to be the nature of the universe. And but the willingness to accept the nature of the universe as is really the key to whether they make a good scientist or not.
Right.
And so I think it was Neil deGrasse Tyson who essentially said that if you believe that God did it, and you use that as the explanation for how you understand the nature of the universe, well, that's the end of the question. That is a way to stop the exploration of knowledge, is to say, well, God did it, so we don't need to know how it works because we know that God did it. So there's no need to have a further discussion.
Right. Well, I hate to say this, but our time's running out, and do we have any announcements we need to make?
We have our summer solstice picnic. If you're a free thinker and you want to join us at Pinchot Park on the 30th, you're welcome to. We'll also be at the Jubilee Day next week in Mechanicsburg.
Well, that's July 21st.
That's July 20th.
Yeah, you're right.
Or
That's
June
next week.
21st.
No,
It's
June 21st, yeah. Whoa,
we'll be at Jubilee Day. And then also we will be at Lancaster Pride this weekend on Saturday. So look for us there.
So we hope to see you. Come on by, whether you're a believer or not.
Yeah, we'd be happy to talk to you.
Yep.
And so have a great night, and thank you, and hope to see you in 2 weeks.